The first breath of baby Sarah filled the room with a kind of magic that only new life can bring. Aisha felt her heart swell as she cradled her daughter, soft and fragile, wrapped in a pale blue blanket. Imran stood beside them, tears glistening in his eyes as he gently brushed a lock of dark hair from Sarah's forehead. The midwife handed the baby to Aisha, and in that moment, Aisha whispered promises of always protecting her little girl. Imran leaned over and kissed Sarah's tiny hand, marveling at how perfect she was, how perfect they all were together. Sunlight filtered through the hospital window and danced across the white sheets. Nurses bustled in and out, offering congratulations and warm smiles. Mrs. Farida sat nearby in a rocking chair, her face shining with pride. She watched her son become a father and felt a deep joy in her chest. Family members had gathered too. Sharing the celebration, Aisha's own mother, leaning on a cane but radiant with happiness. Imran's sister, cheeks flushed with excitement. And even distant cousins, who had flown in at the news of Sarah's birth. The air was full of laughter and soft chatter as everyone admired the baby's tiny fingers and perfect ears. But as the day wore on, quiet tension began to ripple beneath the surface. Mrs. Farida studied Sarah's dark eyes and noticed how they seemed almost too intense for a newborn. She stared at Sarah's curly hair, so different from Imran's straight black strands and Aisha's silky brown waves. Each time she looked, a small knot tightened in her chest. Loved her new granddaughter dearly, but she could not shake the feeling that something about Sarah did not fit the way she thought it should. She kept these thoughts to herself at first, afraid that a mother's joy could be easily spoiled by a whisper of doubt. Aisha and Imran spent the afternoon sinking into the soft hospital chairs, holding Sarah between them. They talked about everything: how they would decorate her nursery, what lullabies they would sing, the first time they would take her home. Aisha marveled at the tiny nails on Sarah's toes, and Imran teased her gently, saying that Sarah would inherit Aisha's strong spirit. In his sense of humor, they laughed together, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. They were a new family, bound together by love and hope, ready to face any challenge. Later, when the room grew quieter and most visitors had left, Mrs. Farida approached. Softly, she reached out to stroke Sarah's cheek and smiled, but her eyes held a shadow of worry. Aisha noticed and offered a gentle smile in return. "She is beautiful, Mama," Aisha said, her voice warm. Imran joined them, wrapping an arm around his wife's shoulders. "We're so happy," he said softly. Mrs. Farida nodded, keeping her doubts under a calm mask. She kissed Sarah's forehead and whispered a blessing for health and happiness. Yet inside, questions spun like restless birds, and she wondered if she would ever speak them out loud. That night, the hospital lights dimmed and silence settled. In the corridor, Aisha rested with Sarah in her arms, lulled by the baby's quiet breathing. Imran sat nearby, filling out paperwork and glancing often at the small family sleeping so peacefully. He felt a fierce protectiveness, as if he could guard their future simply by willing it. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he sensed his mother's tension, but chose to focus on the miracle before him. Tomorrow, he thought, tomorrow we start our new life at home. Tomorrow everything will be perfect. But before sleep came, Mrs. Farida sat alone with her thoughts. She replayed every moment of that day, every glance at Sarah's face. She loved her daughter-in-law and granddaughter so deeply, and she shook her head, trying to banish her unease. "Trust your heart," she told herself. Yet her heart was torn between love and a question she could not yet name. She closed her eyes in the soft hospital night. She prayed for clarity, for peace, and for the wisdom to say the right thing at the right time, unaware that this moment of doubt would grow into a secret that could shake the very foundation of their happiness. She drifted into a restless sleep, the tiny footprint of Sarah's life already casting a long, uncertain shadow across their family's future. The days that followed Sarah's birth were filled with both joy and a quiet unease that began to stir beneath the surface. In the warmth of their home, Aisha and Imran worked together to settle into their new roles as parents. Early in the morning, before the sun had fully risen, Aisha would breastfeed Sarah in the soft glow of the bedroom lamp. She would hum gentle songs and imagine all the wonderful things she wanted her daughter to learn, to speak her first words, to laugh freely, and to discover the world with a brave heart. Imran, on these same mornings, would tiptoe in, careful not to wake either of them, and offer Aisha a steaming cup of tea. He would run his hand across her back, whispering how proud he was of her strength and tenderness. Family support poured in as friends and relatives dropped by to offer meals, help with laundry, or simply hold the baby so Aisha could rest. At first, these visits felt like a comforting blanket wrapped around the couple. Aisha's mother, who had come to stay with them for a week, told stories of Aisha's own childhood, of silly games and bedtime tales. Imran's sister sang lullabies in her gentle voice, and Sarah would calm at once, her tiny hands opening and closing like petals waking in sunlight. Yet through each happy moment, Mrs. Farida's eyes lingered on Sarah in a way that made Aisha uneasy. When she handed Sarah back, her smile sometimes faltered, and Aisha would catch the slightest tremor in her mother-in-law's lips. One afternoon, Aisha decided to take a short walk with Sarah in her stroller. The spring breeze was cool on her cheeks, and she welcomed the chance to stretch her legs after days spent in the nursery. They wandered through the quiet streets of their neighborhood, greeted by neighbors who admired the baby's rosy cheeks and soft coos. Aisha felt a sense of new freedom in the fresh air, imagining all the walks she would share with her daughter. As she grew, she thought of baby shoes by the door, of play dates in the park, of reading picture books under a big oak tree. For a moment, all her worries melted away, and she felt only hope. Back at home, however, Imran found his mother in the kitchen, slicing vegetables for dinner. Mrs. Farida offered him a plate of cut cucumbers and hummus, but her eyes held a distant look. Imran tried to make small talk about work or how the baby slept, but she answered only with short phrases. Finally, he asked gently, "Mama, are you all right?" She brushed aside the question with a soft, "I'm fine, Beta." But Imran recognized the tone of someone who was far from fine. He nodded, choosing not to press her further, but inside worry settled like a stone in his chest. That evening, the family gathered for dinner. The table was set with colorful dishes, fragrant biryani passed on a silver platter, fresh salad bright with tomatoes and cucumbers, flatbread stacked high on a plate. Candlelight flickered, and laughter rose like music. Aisha spooned rice into Imran's plate, and he fed her a bite, saying it was delicious. Sarah cooed from her baby chair at the table's end, her eyes wide with curiosity. But the warm atmosphere dimmed when Mrs. Farida spoke up. She paused mid-sentence, fork halfway to her mouth, and said, "Does Sarah always look so different?" The words hung in the air like broken glass. Hush fell across the table. Aisha froze, her heart pounding. She looked at Imran, who turned pale. The cousins seated beside them exchanged uneasy glances. Aisha asked in a trembling voice, "Different? How do you mean?" Mrs. Farida's expression was both tender and troubled. Her eyes, she said softly, "They are so dark, so deep, and her hair curls in a way I have never seen in our family." Aisha felt a sting of hurt. She knew her own family's heritage included many shades and textures, but she had expected acceptance, not suspicion. Imran reached across the table and grasped his wife's hand. He forced a smile as he tried to ease the tension. "You know that babies can surprise us," he said kindly. "Genes are beautiful in how they combine. Sarah has both my family's strong features and Aisha's gentle warmth." His words were measured but carried an edge of steel. Mrs. Farida nodded, but Aisha could see the doubt in her eyes. Dinner continued in a strained silence, the family tiptoeing around the unspoken question lingering between them like a shadow. Later that night, after Sarah was tucked into her crib and the house had grown still, Aisha stood in the nursery rocking back and forth. She lifted a small mobile of stars above Sarah's bed and watched them spin. Tears slid down her cheeks as she wondered why her mother-in-law could not simply smile at the child she had once held with such love. The same doubts that had first flickered in the hospital now burned brightly in Aisha's chest. She felt the need to protect Sarah from every hurt, but she realized how vulnerable they truly were in a family divided by suspicion. In the living room, Imran sat on the sofa, tracing the outline of a family photograph in his hands. The picture showed him Aisha and Mrs. Farida, after Sarah's naming ceremony, all smiling beneath a canopy of festive lights. His gaze lingered on his mother's face in the photograph, so full of love and pride, and he felt torn between loyalty to her and devotion to his wife and daughter. He rehearsed conversations in his mind: how to defend Aisha, how to demand respect, how to quiet the doubts before they became words that could wound. Above all, he wanted peace for his new family. The next morning, Imran awoke before dawn, dressed quietly, and slipped out of the house, needing space to think. He walked to the edge of a small park near their home, where dew glistened on blades of grass. As the first light of day painted the sky, he closed his eyes and envisioned the life he wanted for Sarah, a childhood filled with laughter, curiosity, and unconditional love. He realized that the whispers of doubt had the power to fracture their unity, and he vowed to stand with Aisha no matter what. With this resolve, he returned home at sunrise, ready to face whatever lay ahead. When he stepped inside, the scent of fresh tea filled the air. Aisha greeted him with a tired but genuine smile, and Sarah stirred in her mother's arms. Seeing them together, Imran felt both joy and sorrow for the family he cherished. Sorrow for the hidden rift that threatened to grow. He kissed Aisha's forehead in with a quiet voice, said, "We will handle this together. Our love will be stronger than any doubt." Aisha nodded, leaning into him, grateful for his steady strength. In that moment, they stood united, ready to heal the fracture before it widened, determined to protect the bond they had created with their daughter. And though the road ahead promised challenges, they faced it with courage in their hearts and hope for the family they were building. ChatGPT said, Aisha woke early one morning to the soft coo of Sarah from her crib. She crept into the nursery and smiled at her daughter's peaceful face. She gently lifted Sarah and rocked her, humming a lullaby. The warm light of dawn crept through the curtains as Aisha thought about the week ahead. She had planned to return to work part-time, teaching art at the community center. Imran had agreed it would be good for her to reconnect with friends and use her talents. They had arranged for Mrs. Farida to babysit on the days when Aisha would teach. Yet when Aisha mentioned her plan the night before, her mother-in-law had only nodded, her eyes distant. Aisha wanted to believe everything would be fine. That Tuesday afternoon, Aisha dressed carefully and packed Sarah's things. Tiny outfits, placed diapers in a neat stack, and slipped in a small toy. She kissed Imran lightly on the cheek as he walked out the door for work. "I'll be back by 4, she said. Sarah gurgled and reached for her mother's hair. Aisha smiled and stroked her soft curls. She walked to the front room, where Mrs. Farida sat sewing a hem on Imran's shirt. The afternoon sun warmed her shoulders. "Mama," Aisha said, "would you mind watching Sarah today while I teach?" Mrs. Farida set down her needle and thread. Her face was calm, but her voice held a firmness that caught Aisha off guard. "I'm sorry, Beta," she said. "I cannot today." Aisha's heart sank. "But you said," she began. Mrs. Farida lifted her hand gently. "I am not comfortable today," she said softly. "I need some rest." Aisha swallowed. She had arranged her day around her mother-in-law's help. "Rest," Aisha repeated. "You rest every day." Mrs. Farida shook her head, folding Imran's shirt. "It is something I must do," she said. Her tone was polite, but final. Aisha felt her excitement drain away. "But I have nowhere else," she whispered. Mrs. Farida's eyes held sorrow and something else. Guilt, maybe. "I'm sorry," she said again. "Perhaps tomorrow." Aisha's vision blurred as she whispered "thank you" and carried Sarah into her arms. She closed the front door without looking back. The walk to the community center felt long, and her steps were heavy. When she arrived, she greeted her students with a forced smile. She painted circles of bright blue and yellow on her canvas, but her mind was on Sarah and where she would go that afternoon. At lunch, she called Imran and asked him to change his meeting. He promised to try, but he returned home later with fatigue on his face. "They kept me late," he said. "I'm sorry, my love." Aisha sat at the table, dinner half finished. She looked at him, her eyes raw. "Mama wouldn't watch Sarah?" "Today," she said quietly. She said she needed rest. Imran frowned, pushing noodles around his plate. Rest. She always rests. He sighed and reached across the table. This is your mother, right? Could she do it? Aisha shook her head. I don't want to ask her again. It's too hard. They ate in silence, the closeness from earlier days already fraying. That weekend, the family gathered for Sunday brunch at Aisha and Imran's home. Imran's cousins arrived bearing gifts, a soft blanket, a toy rattle, a basket of fruit. Aisha's mother came too, offering cinnamon buns fresh from her oven. The kitchen buzzed with chatter as the adults filled plates and the children chased each other in the backyard. Sarah sat in a high chair, cooing and grabbing at the fruit on her tray. Aisha laughed as Sarah squashed a grape, leaving a purple stain on her cheek. But when it was time for Mrs. Farida to hold Sarah, she hung back. Her husband, Aisha's father-in-law, offered to cradle the baby, and she stepped aside without a word. Aisha noticed, her smile fading, watched as Mrs. Farida sipped tea, her eyes fixed on the garden beyond the window. Aisha approached her gently. Mama, would you like to hold her? She asked. Mrs. Farida shook her head and smiled politely. I'm fine, she said, though her voice was thin. Aisha's heart tightened. She turned away, trying to rejoin the others, but her joy had been pierced by her mother-in-law's rejection. As the day went on, subtle comments drifted through the air. A cousin remarked on Sarah's dark lashes and rich skin tone. An aunt asked if she would have more children. With different looks, Aisha laughed it off, but each question landed like an unwelcome leaf on her fresh painting.
Oh.
The joy drained away. She felt exposed and unprotected, as though everyone was weighing her family and finding it strange. Imran sensed her distress and took her hand when no one else was looking, but his touch felt small against the current of doubt swirling around. Then that evening after the guests left, Aisha found Mrs. Farida in the living room, gazing at a family photo album. The pages were filled with black and white photographs of Imran and his siblings as children, their hair straight and features familiar. The album captured birthdays, holidays, and school plays' happy moments frozen in time. Aisha watched her mother-in-law trace a finger over one picture. They all looked the same, Mrs. Farida said quietly. Her voice trembled. Except for Sarah. Aisha took a deep breath. Mama, she said, she's our daughter. She's precious to us. Mrs. Farida closed the album and folded her hands. I know, she said. I know you love her. I love her too. But Aisha saw the fight in her eyes, the conflict between love and doubt. Days later, Imran decided it was time to address the issue head-on. He invited his mother to sit in the study, away from Sarah, where they could speak freely. Aisha waited in the next room, her heart pounding. She hoped for understanding, but feared more pain. In the study, Imran sat on a leather chair, his posture stiff. Mrs. Farida settled in a cushioned seat across from him. He spoke calmly but firmly. Mama, I need to know why you were distant from Sarah, he said. Why you refused to hold her and make comments about her features. Mrs. Farida looked down, clasping her hands. My son, she began, her voice wavering. I never meant to hurt you or Aisha. I love Sarah. She is beautiful. But I had a mother's instinct. Something in my heart told me she did not belong. Her voice broke and tears formed at the corners of her eyes. I saw things in her that I could not explain. It frightened me. Imran's face softened with concern. He reached forward. Mama, your instinct must trust love as much as it trusts doubt. This is our child. She bowed her head, shoulders trembling. But what if I was wrong? She whispered. What if I cause harm by doubting? Imran stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. You have caused harm, he said gently, but we can heal. You must choose trust now. He paused. Do you trust me, Mama? She looked into his eyes and saw both warmth and pain. Yes, she whispered. At that moment, Aisha entered the room, holding Sarah wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked at her husband and mother-in-law, hope shining in her eyes. Mama, she said softly, this is your granddaughter. Please hold her. Mrs. Farida steadied herself, then reached out. Her hand shook as she lifted Sarah into her arms. Sarah stirred, then gazed up at her grandmother with bright curiosity. For a moment, time stood still. Mrs. Farida's face collapsed in tears. She pressed her cheek against Sarah's head and whispered, "Forgive me." Aisha and Imran watched, their hearts full. The air was thick with emotion, but the fracture had begun to mend. Though doubts still lingered, everyone had spoken there. Truth. The bonds between mother, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter felt raw, but stronger for having been tested. In that quiet study, they embraced 3 generations united in love, facing an uncertain future together, but resolved to protect their family against any doubt that might arise again. You said, Part 4 KO, expand KRO, without heading 1,300 words, Mayan simple. The morning air was cool and crisp as Aisha walked into the kitchen, cradling Sarah in her arms. The baby stirred, opening her eyes to the soft light that filtered through the curtains. Aisha had spent the night thinking about how to protect her little family from any more hurt. She placed Sarah in her high chair and set a bowl of warm oatmeal in front of her. She watched as Sarah hesitated, then eagerly scooped the spoon toward her mouth, smearing oatmeal on her cheeks. Aisha laughed, her heart lifting at the sight. It would be different, she promised herself. Meanwhile, Imran met with a lab technician at a small medical office on the edge of town. He handed over the DNA samples for himself, for Aisha, and for baby Sarah. His hands trembled as he signed the release forms. But he smiled at the technician and said, "Thank you for your help." The technician offered a reassuring nod. "We'll have the results in 2 days," she said. Imran left with a folder marked confidential, feeling both relief and anxiety. He knew that answers were on the way, but he also feared what those answers would bring. Back at home, Mrs. Farida sat alone in the living room, her mind replaying the events of the past weeks. She had held Sarah, she had apologized, and yet the whisper of doubt lingered in the corners of her heart. Knew that love could heal, but she also felt a secret weight pressing on her chest. A memory of years ago surfaced on an affair she once had, brief and long buried. She had never spoken of it, not even to her husband. But now, faced with the possibility that Sarah might carry someone else's blood, the old secret felt like a stone ready to topple. That afternoon, Aisha and Imran settled into the study, side by side on the sofa, while Sarah napped in her crib behind a glass door. They had agreed to face the DNA results together, no matter what they revealed. Imran held Aisha's hand, their fingers entwined. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we will face it together, you, me, and our daughter." Aisha nodded, her eyes bright with tears. "Always," she replied, her voice steady. They sat in silence, hearts pounding, until a soft knock sounded at the door. The lab technician stood there, envelope in hand. Imran stood and took the envelope, sliding it into his jacket pocket before gently ushering the technician out of the house. He returned to the sofa and looked at Aisha. "Here it is," he said. He paused, taking a deep breath as he broke the seal. His fingers unfolded the paper, and his eyes scanned the words. Aisha leaned forward, her breath catching. Imran's face changed, moving from relief to shock within seconds. "What is it?" Aisha asked, her voice trembling. Imran swallowed hard. "The first part is clear. Sarah is indeed our daughter. Her DNA matches both of us perfectly." Aisha exhaled in relief, closing her eyes for a moment. "That's wonderful," she said, smiling as tears rolled down her cheeks. But Imran held up a finger. "There's something else," he said quietly. "Something unexpected." He handed the report to Aisha. She read the lines. "Additional. Familial match. 50% genetic overlap with subject registered as Mrs. Farida's maternal half-sibling." The words slowed her heart. She looked up at Imran, confusion and fear in her eyes. "What does this mean?" she whispered. Imran ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tight. "It means," he said, "that Sarah shares half of her genes with someone else listed in the lab's database. That person is from your mother-in-law's side." Aisha's mind spun. "But how can that be?" she asked. "If I'm her mother and you're her father, why would she match someone else from your family?" Imran shook his head. I don't know yet, but it points to something in Mama's past. Aisha felt a wave of anger and betrayal rise in her. She looked toward the nursery door, where Sarah slept peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing. They decided they needed to speak with Mrs. Farida immediately. Imran found her in the garden, tending to her roses. The old wooden fence glowed pink under the late afternoon sun, and the scent of blossoms drifted through the air. Mrs. Farida looked up as they approached, her face a mask of calm. Imran took the report from his pocket. "Mama," he said softly, "we have the DNA results." He handed the paper to her. Mrs. Farida's hands shook as she took it. Imran and Aisha stood together, waiting. She read the first lines and smiled, relief softening her features. But as she reached the unexpected note, her eyes widened and she gasped. Aisha reached out to steady her. "What is it?" Aisha asked. Mrs. Farida's voice was unsteady. This says Sarah's a half-relative to someone on my side of the family." She closed her eyes, pulling a hand to her mouth. "Oh God," she whispered. "I never wanted this to come out." Imran placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Mama, please tell us," he said gently. "We need the truth." Tears welled in Mrs. Farida's eyes as she set the paper down on a garden bench. She sat, shoulders hunched. Aisha knelt beside her, taking her hand. "You can tell us anything, Mama," Aisha said softly. Mrs. Farida looked up at her daughter-in-law, her expression torn between shame and relief. She drew a shaky breath. "Years ago," she began, her voice low, "before you were born, Aisha, I had a brief relationship. It lasted only a few months. I was young, confused, and I made a terrible mistake." Her eyes filled with tears. "I never told your father, and I never told anyone. I thought it was over, that it would never matter." She paused, voice cracking. "But I was wrong." Aisha felt shock and hurt, but she squeezed Mrs. Farida's hand. "Continue," she urged. Mrs. Farida nodded, wiping her cheeks. "The man was someone I trusted," she said. "He was not from our family, but he and we had a child, a baby girl. I could not raise her. I gave her up for adoption." She bowed her head. "I told myself I was protecting her, protecting our family. I thought it would stay buried forever." Aisha's eyes filled with tears as she processed the confession. Imran stood behind her mother, his own emotions raw. "Mama," he said softly, This means Sarah is that child's granddaughter." Mrs. Farida nodded, tears falling. "Freely now, yes," she whispered. "Sarah's mother, my birth daughter, had a child. That child's daughter is your granddaughter." She closed her eyes, her voice barely audible. "That's why the DNA test showed a match with my half-sister." Aisha took in the revelation, her mind racing. She glanced at Imran, who nodded at her. They both reached out to eldest woman in their family and enveloped her in a gentle embrace. "Thank you for telling us," Imran said. "We know it took courage." Mrs. Farida leaned into them, her sobs quieting. "I was so afraid," she said. "Afraid of losing you, afraid of losing this family." Aisha stroked her hair. "You're still our family," she said firmly. "Secrets can hurt, but honesty can heal." Imran added, "We love Sarah. She is our daughter and granddaughter. No secret can change that." As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the garden, the three of them sat together. The old hurt began to soften in the glow of their shared love. Mrs. Farida wiped her cheeks, looking at Sarah's nursery window. "Will you forgive me?" she asked, voice trembling. Aisha smiled through her tears. "We already have," she said. Imran placed an arm around both women. "Change is nothing but our understanding," he said. "We will move forward together, stronger for what we learned." In that moment, the fractured pieces of their family found a new way to fit. The secret that had threatened to tear them apart now became a bridge to deeper honesty and connection. And as they rose to go inside and care for Sarah, they carried with them a renewed sense of unity, ready to face whatever the future held together. The morning sun slipped through the curtains in soft, golden beams as Aisha carried Sarah into the kitchen. Oh, you know. Imran stood by the counter, slicing fresh fruit for breakfast. The air was warm with the scent of toast and ripe mango. Mrs. Farida sat at the small table, brushing a light dusting of powdered sugar onto pancakes. Her eyes met Aisha's with a gentle warmth, and for the first time in weeks there was no tension. In her smile, Aisha set Sarah in her high chair and placed a plate of soft banana slices before her. Sarah grabbed one and popped it into her mouth, her eyes lighting up with delight. Aisha laughed and leaned close. "Good morning, my darling," she whispered. Imran carried 2 steaming mugs of chai to the table and handed one to Mrs. Farida. She accepted it with a nod, her hands still trembling slightly. He sat down beside her, resting a comforting hand on her shoulder. They all ate together. The family circle restored. Mrs. Farida took a careful bite of pancake, savoring the sweetness. She looked at Sarah, whose face was already smudged with crumbs, and felt a surge of love she had feared she might lose. She swallowed and spoke softly. "Sarah's growing so fast," she said. "I can't believe how much she changes every day." Aisha's eyes glowed with pride. "She learns something new all the time," Aisha replied. Just yesterday she tried to clap her hands. As they spoke, memories of the past weeks danced through Mrs. Farida's mind, the doubt, the fear, the confession in the garden. Thought of her lifelong habit of keeping secrets to protect others, and she realized now how her silence had hurt the ones she loved most. She looked at Imran and Aisha, recalling their courage in facing the truth without judgment. "I want to say thank you," she said, her voice wavering with emotion, "for showing me that honesty is the greatest gift." Imran reached across the table and took his mother's hand. "We thank you," he said, "for trusting us with your heart." Aisha added, "We are stronger because of this, and we will always stand together, no matter what." Mrs. Farida closed her eyes, tears threatening to spill over. She nodded, and when she opened her eyes, a clear resolve shone in them. "I promise to never let doubt drive me again," she declared. "From now on, I will listen to love first." After breakfast, Aisha and Imran spent the morning organizing the photo albums that had once felt like relics of an unblemished past. They invited Mrs. Farida to help choose which photos to display on the living room wall. As they flipped through pages, they paused at a picture of a young Mrs. Farida, smiling beside a man they did not know. It was a photograph from the time of her secret affair, a memory she had hidden so deeply. Now she held the picture in trembling hands and said, "This was a moment of confusion and hope for me. I was lost, but I was also searching for love." She let out a small laugh. "Never thought I'd show this to anyone." Aisha took the photo gently. "This is part of our story," she said. "Your story, Imran's story, and now Sarah's story too. It reminds us that life is full of mistakes and miracles." Imran nodded, stepping forward to hang the frame. On the wall, as they positioned it, the 3 generations stood back to admire the growing collage. Each photograph told a tale of joy, struggle, and resilience. Even the picture of the young Mrs. Farida and her hidden love found a place among the others, reminding them all that broken pieces could become a beautiful mosaic. That afternoon, the sun was high in the sky when they took Sarah to the neighborhood park. The grassy field was dotted with picnic blankets and families laughing in the warmth. Aisha spread a blanket under a big oak tree while Imran helped. Sarah practiced her first steps on the soft grass. Mrs. Farida sat nearby, watching with pride. Every time Sarah wobbled and then steadied herself, She cheered and clapped. It was as if she were making up for lost time, pouring all her grandmotherly love into each moment. At one point, a neighbor passed by with her own little girl, whose hair curled just like Sarah's. The neighbor smiled and said, "Look how much your granddaughter's hair bounces in the sun." Mrs. Farida beamed. In the past, she might have felt that curl was a sign of difference. Now, she saw it as a thing of beauty, a gift that made Sarah unique. "Yes," she said proudly, "she has the softest curls and the brightest eyes." As the neighbor walked on, Mrs. Farida stroked Sarah's hair, feeling a tenderness she had long feared she would never fully embrace. They spent the rest of the afternoon playing games, blowing bubbles and enjoying each other's company. When Sarah grew tired, Aisha draped a light blanket over her and sat beside her, humming a lullaby. Mrs. Farida watched them, her heart full. She realized that the fear of secrets had once kept her from experiencing simple joys. But now, after the storm of truth, she felt lighter than she had in years. As dusk approached, they returned home, the sky painted with shades of pink and orange. Imran carried a sleeping Sarah into the nursery, and Aisha followed with soft steps. They tucked Sarah into her bed, placing a small stuffed elephant beside her. In the hallway, Mrs. Farida lingered, watching the peaceful rise and fall of her granddaughter's chest. She pressed a hand to her heart, whispering a quiet prayer of gratitude. Later, as the family gathered in the living room for tea, Mrs. Farida surprised them by bringing out a box of old letters she had written long ago, but never sent. Each letter was addressed to the child she had given up for adoption. She handed the box to Aisha with a soft smile.
"I want you to keep these,"
she said.
"and one day I will tell you their story, and together we will decide what to do."
Aisha accepted the box, understanding the depth of trust behind the gesture. Imran and Aisha exchanged a look of shared understanding and compassion. In the days that followed, the family settled into a new rhythm, built on honesty and acceptance. Mrs. Farida helped Aisha with feeding schedules and laundry, offering motherly advice rather than doubt. Imran and Aisha included her in every decision, valuing her experience and love. And Sarah, blissfully unaware of the earlier turmoil, thrived in a home filled with open hearts and clear truths. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching fireflies drift across the yard, Aisha leaned into Imran's side. "Our family is different now," she said softly, "but in the best way possible." Imran kissed her forehead. "We have learned that love grows stronger when we share our truth," he replied. Mrs. Farida added, "and that forgiveness is the light that guides us home." They fell silent, listening to the gentle sounds of night and feeling the quiet peace that comes after storms. In that moment, all the pain and confusion of the past weeks faded into a memory, a necessary chapter in their story. Ahead lay a life, bright with promise. Birthdays and school days, family gatherings and new photos on the wall, stories to pass down and secrets to leave behind. Together, they had transformed doubt into understanding and secrets into bridges of empathy. And as they watched the fireflies fade into the darkness, they knew that the bond they shared would carry them forward, stronger and more united than ever before.